Okay, Ryan, let's transition here and let's talk about SailPoint's non-employee resource management or NERM module. Where are you seeing that getting implemented these days? What kind of organizations and what kind of benefits are they getting from it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the non-employee is kind of a universal problem. It feels like across a lot of organizations that they're trying to solve. And that stems from a lot of organizations don't have their non-employees are not part of their HR system. They have an HR system as their authoritative source for their employees because it does all the stuff that HR systems do, which is really focused on paying people and benefits. And so a lot of organizations are like, yeah, we handle the HR, we handle the employees, but you go work through procurement or whoever else to manage your contractors. And so they come into the organization through an independent process outside of HR. And so a lot of organizations have just adapted, trying to figure out how do I get a non-employee contractor into the organization? How do I give them access to do stuff? And they've just kind of created their own processes, whether that's like an email chain of, hey, I need this person to start, and then somebody approves it. It goes to a ServiceNow queue, and someone creates an Active Directory account and puts a special tag on it in Active Directory, and that's your process. That's that's where the non-employees came in, and we do searches on Active Directory to know who the non-employees are. And then we kind of pull them in and give them access, but there's no real process around it, and they don't meet all the governance criteria that you would want. So it's not employee risk management, because that's a risk if your processes are that manual and completely different for how you're managing the life cycle, for example, of an employee. So it is to manage that particular risk. And so because there are tools out there, but from an identity perspective, it's really important to have a nice, clean process. So some organizations do opt to take their non-employees and put them into their HR system. And now there are HR systems that do have modules within the HR system itself to start managing non-employees. So we do see some organizations opt for that path. Others, though, have said it's really important to not actually have non-employees and employees in the same system, and they stick with that it's better to have them independently managed. And part of it is that you can do a lot more in a non-employee risk management, like NERM solution offers a lot of capabilities that are kind of appealing to some organizations. One of them is this idea of delegated administration, where I have an external portal where if there's someone I need to become part of a non-employee resource within my organization, I can delegate that work to somebody else to fill out all the paperwork and forms and all the vetting and NDAs that need to be signed and whatever else needs to be done prior to the person becoming, getting access within the organization. Have them fill all that out and be self-managed, self-delegated outward, and then it comes into the organization as a checkbox and approval process, as opposed to having someone inside the organization have to reach out via email, track these things back and forth, get the names, do all the manual entry, fill in the person's info, fill in their name, fill in their phone number, fill in their address, fill in all the stuff I got to have to be able to create a record. You can delegate that, and it's pretty cool. For one of our customers, they're even adding identity validation into it. So we've integrated NERM with Experian to be able to do a validation that the person is who they say they are, even before they come into the organization, before they even get processed through the NERM process, before it ever shows up, as part of an integration point with SailPoint. As far as being able to provision access and create an identity, et cetera. So let's see, we've got higher ed examples that have used this effectively to manage certain populations of students that don't fit in their normal student process. We've got multiple I guess, teaching hospitals where there's a need, for example, like the nurses and affiliates and external people who come into that organization that need all that front end process to be managed, have come in through there as well. So those are both I guess some examples of clients that this has been really beneficial for.
I know much of the risk of non-employees in an organization, once you've got them in and they're provisioned and so forth, obviously they're a high turnover population in general. And so it's, the getting them in is one part of the risk. Once you get them in, that's great. And you finally got them in. But then there's the getting them out after they roll off a project, or they're no longer with the organization. How do you know when they're gone, right?
Right.
How have you seen NERM address that scenario?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it because of that delegated administration, you have a lot of the right kind of metadata to be able to actually know where the person came from, what the contact is, info for that resource, where they came from. And as part of the SailPoint integration piece, you can run those access certifications. You can do some workflows that help you do a regular validation, and should this person still be active or not. You can run regular certifications as well, on the specific SailPoint side. So the value is that you now have a separate authoritative source in this NERM module, which sits outside of the actual SailPoint ISE, if you will. And you integrate those two so that you have an authoritative source, and you can do all the workflows and whatever else you want specific to that individual prior to them becoming a record that then gets actually pulled into SailPoint and managed as all the other employees, non-employees, everyone else, as an identity that then is managed. So that risk part of it is that you can do those regular checks to make sure that those resources should still have access. There's also a capability in there to help manage risk levels on resources. You can kind of quantify that up front in the NERM process, and you can have policies that are tied to that. We haven't seen that used as much in our practical experience, but the capability is there to actually manage it at a risk level, where you can put risk levels on individuals based on the criteria that they're coming in as.
All right, so Ryan, transitioning to talking about managed services, or maybe from your perspective, how have you seen things evolve as people have, as organizations have brought in these security providers to manage their identity platforms like SailPoint and so forth? How have you seen it evolve and mature up to this point?
Yeah, great question. I think from a managed services perspective, what typically drives people to managed services is the pain points got to hit right for you to start considering managed services, right? And it varies quite a bit by organization and that organization's culture. Some cultures are just, there's no consideration for managed services. They've always done it a certain way, and they intend to keep doing it a certain way. And there's other organizations that are very managed services friendly, like outsource friendly. Let's have other people do this so we can focus on our core functions. That's always been the case, but it feels like there's a little bit of a more, especially in the identity space, where it feels to me like it's moving a little bit more to people being open to considering it where they might not have considered it in the past. And I think that's due to just sometimes the complexities of it. For example, IGA is hard. It's a hard thing. There may be, if I'm thinking through all the clients that we've done, let's say in this last year, maybe 1 out of 10 of the clients that we've helped them implement an IGA solution have, at the end of the initial engagement, get them stand up to a certain point, have an internal team who knows what they're talking about, who understands how to do it, and they're ready to do 80-90% of it on their own and carry it from that point forward. That almost never happens, right? So we had one, and it was like this miraculous thing. Oh, how did this happen? You guys found the right people, and they had the right people to be able to actually pick it up, learn it, do it in context. They had people that they'd hired in that already had some general experience in the space, and they were really off and running. For 90% of everybody else, it's never a one and done. You're going to need more help no matter what to get that into a program and into a kind of a, how do I get this into a place where it has some steady growth and it's turned into a program, not just this project to stand up an app, right?
Yeah.
And so because of that complexity, and because those resources are hard to find and they're expensive, we're seeing more people opt to saying, well, can I get some longer term help? And oftentimes that does kind of lend right into a nice managed services offering. That's kind of the trend I'm seeing there.
And what how are you seeing those services evolve? You know, the actual services being provided. With, you know, so if someone says, "Yeah, give me a managed service provider," what generally have they looked for in the past, and what are they looking for today?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, at least me, when I traditionally think of managed services, I've got someone who's watching a screen, looking for an outage, being able to respond to that outage, get teams ready to respond to it quickly, and they're managing tickets. So it's how do we keep the system up and running, and how do we respond when it doesn't run, right? To me, that's the old mentality of here's what managed services is. Well, in identity, that is less of the scenario. The outages seem to be much fewer, further in between. But what it's really about is how do I actually turn this into the value proposition how do I realize the value that made me make the decision in the first place, to go forward with this maturity step of actually doing IGA, doing SailPoint the right way. And so it's really about the maturity, it's the growth, it's the improvements, I think, that seem to be the real sweet spot of a managed services offering is how do I get into a continuous improvement model with my managed service provider that helps me move the needle from what I just implemented initially, at least for the next year, year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, to get all the right applications also onboarded, to start using all the other processes around, for example, segregation of duties that I might want to get to eventually, to doing roles and doing RBAC. Those are usually things that take a little bit more maturity, and so they're not things that you do right off the bat. And to lock in with a partner who can help you do that over time seems to be appealing.
Yeah, and not having to go necessarily SOW by SOW, where you can have you can just have this continuous model as a managed service provider.
That's right.
That just continually delivers the priorities, and the priorities can flex over that period, right?
Exactly. Because there is flex that's going to be needed regardless. Even the SOW to SOW model, where you scope it out, you estimate it, you say this is the scope and this is how many months exactly we're going to do. You know, inevitably, when you are in the project and you're executing it at that scope, if it's a large set of scope over a long period of time, it's going to be different. When you get in there and get the discovery and the priorities, and you meet with the teams internally, you find out that the priorities are going to shift a little bit from what you thought they were. So having the flexibility built in, you know, it really can make a difference for an organization to just keep moving.
Yep, that's good. So, are you seeing, you know, now that it's kind of evolved to the place that you've just described around adding more business value over time, continuously improving, kind of all the above, where you know, you call it a managed service, but it's really everything from soup to nuts. It's a full service, from implementation all the way through continuous improvement, all the way through break fix and so forth. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just nailed it. That is exactly the vision, is to have it from the beginning. If you can do it from the beginning and get right into the process, and then you can bring the teams along, you can right size the level of effort that you want to spend on that continuous improvement. So there's a lot of flexibility there for how aggressive you want to be with how quickly do you want to get to that value, and how much change can your organization absorb. Some organizations are ready. They just need the guidance and they need the expertise to help them get there. Other organizations just are slow to adopt stuff. And so you want to make sure you're right sizing what that continuous improvement looks like within your managed services offering. And you can also pair that up with, not specific to just IGA, not just specific to SailPoint, right? It could be, how does that, along with what I'm doing around access enforcement or access management, and how does that tie into my privileged access? You can really do the whole gamut, because there are some overlaps there, and there's some important overlaps there that, if done right at the right maturity level, you're going to want to have those conversations anyway. So being able to get into with a managed service provider who can do, take on those other pieces as well, and then do it all cohesively, that's big.